Imagine standing atop the Palatine Hill in 476 CE. The once mighty heart of civilization now lies diminished. The last Roman emperor of the West, a young boy named Romulus Augustulus, is being stripped of his imperial regalia. No battles rage in the streets. No final heroic stand marks this moment. Rome's fall comes not with thunder, but with a whisper. How did the most powerful empire in human history crumble from within? The story of Rome's collapse is not one of a sudden catastrophe, but rather a slow and complex unraveling spanning centuries. To understand this decline, we must journey back to the golden age of Roman prosperity, when few could imagine that such power might ever wane. By the 2nd century CE, the Roman Empire stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Mesopotamia. Over 70 million people lived under Roman rule in a period historians call the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. This vast territorial domain facilitated trade on an unprecedented scale. Grain from Egypt fed the citizens of Rome. Silk from China adorned the wealthy. Spices from India seasoned their food. The Mediterranean was transformed into what Romans proudly called Mare Nostrum, our sea. The Roman economy operated on remarkable sophistication. At its height, the empire maintained a unified currency, an extensive road network, and maritime trade routes that connected 3 continents. The denarius and aureus coins circulated widely, facilitating commerce across vast distances. Archaeological evidence reveals specialized production centers and trade networks that would not be matched again in Europe for more than 1,000 years. But even during this golden age, the seeds of decline were taking root. Emperor Marcus Aurelius, often considered the last great ruler of Rome's height, spent much of his reign defending the borders against Germanic tribes. As he wrote in his personal reflections, the Meditations, "Look back over the past, with its changing empires that rose and fell, and you can foresee the future too." The economic foundations began shifting as early as the 3rd century, though few recognized it then. The crisis of the 3rd century marked a pivotal turning point. Between 235 and 284 CE, Rome had 26 different emperors, most meeting violent ends. Political instability became the norm rather than the exception. As military expenses mounted to defend the sprawling borders, emperors resorted to currency debasement, reducing the silver content in coins while maintaining their face value. Emperor Diocletian's price edict of 301 CE attempted to combat the resulting inflation by fixing maximum prices for goods and services. Like most attempts at price controls throughout history, it failed. The underlying economic problems remained unsolved. The Roman taxation system grew increasingly burdensome. In the western provinces especially, wealthy landowners often passed these costs down to tenant farmers. This created a cycle of rural impoverishment. Agricultural productivity declined as small farms were absorbed into large estates called latifundia. These vast agricultural operations relied increasingly on slave labor rather than free citizens. Historian Peter Brown describes this transformation. The Roman Empire did not fall. It transformed. And indeed, the economic changes reshaped Roman society itself. The middle class that had once filled the ranks of Rome's legions gradually disappeared. Social mobility, once a hallmark of Roman meritocracy, became increasingly rare. By the 4th century, the division between East and West had become pronounced. In 330 CE, Emperor Constantine made a decision that would have profound implications. He established a new capital in the East, Constantinople. This city, strategically positioned between Europe and Asia, would flourish while Rome itself entered a period of gradual decay. The eastern provinces had always been wealthier, with more urbanized populations and greater commercial activity. The Silk Road and Red Sea trade routes brought prosperity to the east, while the west became increasingly agrarian and isolated. This economic disparity would prove decisive in the coming centuries. Emperor Theodosius marked another turning point when he divided the empire between his sons in 395 CE. Arcadius received the east and Honorius the west. While intended as an administrative solution, this division became permanent. The two halves of the empire would face the coming challenges separately, with drastically different outcomes. The arrival of the Huns from Central Asia set off a chain reaction. Germanic tribes, pushed westward by Hunnic expansion, sought refuge within Roman borders. In 376 CE, the Goths crossed the Danube with Roman permission, but mistreatment by corrupt officials transformed these potential allies into enemies. 2 years later, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Goths defeated Roman forces and killed Emperor Valens. This military disaster accelerated changes in how Rome defended itself. Unable to recruit sufficient soldiers from the citizen population, the empire increasingly relied on foederati, allied barbarian troops commanded by their own leaders. As historian Edward Gibbon observed, Rome now defended itself with the very forces that threatened it. The economic impact of these military changes was profound. The professional Roman legions had once served as economic agents, spending their salaries in provincial towns and creating markets for local goods. Their replacement with tribal warriors disrupted this economic function. Garrisoned towns that had thrived for centuries saw commerce collapse. Tax revenues declined as territories were lost or became effectively autonomous. With diminished resources, the Western Roman government could no longer maintain the infrastructure that had made the empire's economy possible. Roads fell into disrepair. Bridges collapsed. Maritime trade diminished as naval power waned. In this deteriorating environment, the sack of Rome in 410 CE by Alaric and his Visigoths sent shockwaves throughout the Mediterranean world. St. Augustine, witnessing these events, began writing his masterpiece, The City of God, partly in response to claims that Rome's adoption of Christianity had led to its downfall. Augustine wrote, "Rome has fallen, just as Babylon and Nineveh, and countless other human cities before it." His theological perspective helped contemporaries process what seemed unthinkable. The Eternal City had fallen to foreign invaders for the first time in 800 years. The economic damage was psychological as much as physical. Investment declined as uncertainty increased. Why build for the future when tomorrow seemed so precarious? Trade networks contracted further as security diminished. The Mediterranean, once a highway of commerce, became increasingly dangerous as naval patrols decreased.
Do you like to dig deeper? Political economy is full of powerful ideas. You're right in the thick of it. Insightful, thought-provoking, expanding every step of the way. From Adam Smith and the rise of capitalism to Marx's bold critique, mercantilism, Keynesian economics, neoliberalism, and more. Or we explore it all, clearly and from every angle. Keep the momentum going. Check the links, dive deeper, and subscribe for more.
Monetary economy retreated in the western provinces. With fewer coins in circulation and less security for merchants, economic activity became increasingly local. Self-sufficient estates became the ideal as urban markets declined. This urbanization had profound cultural effects. Cities had been centers of Roman culture and administration. Their decline accelerated the unraveling of Roman institutions. The Roman taxation system, designed for a unified empire with secure borders, proved unsuitable for these changed conditions. Yet, fiscal demands remained high, driving more farmers into dependency on large landowners who could offer protection from tax collectors. Historian Peter Heather describes this as protection and predation, becoming two sides of the same coin. By the mid-5th century, effective Roman control had receded from Britain, most of Gaul, and parts of Spain. North Africa, Rome's breadbasket, fell to the Vandals in 439 CE. The loss of its grain shipments and tax revenues was a devastating blow to the Western Empire. Against this backdrop of decline emerged one final notable Roman general, Flavius Aetius. In 451 CE, he successfully organized a coalition that defeated Attila the Hun at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. But Attila's death shortly after and the subsequent dissolution of Hunnic power did not provide the respite Rome needed. The damage to imperial institutions had progressed too far. Political instability reached its zenith as military commanders like Ricimer became kingmakers, placing their chosen candidates on the imperial throne. The position of Western Roman emperor became increasingly ceremonial, with real power held by Germanic military leaders. This brings us back to 476 CE. The Germanic commander Odoacer deposed the teenaged emperor Romulus Augustulus and declared himself king of Italy. He sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople, declaring that one emperor was sufficient. This event is traditionally marked as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Yet, for many Romans, daily life continued much as before. Odoacer and his successor Theodoric maintained Roman administrative structures and legal codes. They ruled as kings of Italy while acknowledging the nominal sovereignty of the Eastern emperor. The transformation was political and economic rather than a sudden social collapse. In the East, the Roman Empire, which historians call Byzantine to distinguish it from its earlier phase, survived and even thrived. Emperor Justinian would later attempt to reconquer the western provinces, achieving temporary success in North Africa, Italy, and parts of Spain. But these gains proved fleeting and economically unsustainable. The divergent fates of East and West demonstrate the importance of economic foundations to imperial survival. The Eastern Empire maintained control of the richest provinces, preserved urban life and trade networks, and sustained a money economy that supported imperial institutions. What lessons can we draw from this complex historical process? Rome teaches us that economic resilience is as important as military might for imperial longevity. The empire's inability to reform its fiscal and economic systems to meet changing conditions played a crucial role in its transformation. Environmental factors also contributed to Rome's challenges. Recent climate research has revealed evidence of climate instability during this period. Volcanic eruptions in the 530s CE caused global cooling that affected agricultural productivity. Bubonic plague struck the Mediterranean world in 541 CE, with devastating demographic and economic consequences, particularly for the Eastern Empire's reconquest efforts. The economic complexity that had been Rome's strength became its vulnerability. Specialized production and long-distance trade created efficiencies but also dependencies. When security and governance faltered, the sophisticated economic networks unraveled. Regions that could not sustain themselves without imports faced hardship and population decline. Historian Brian Ward Perkins describes this process as the end of complexity. The material standard of living declined dramatically in the former Western provinces. Archaeological evidence shows a marked decrease in the quality and quantity of pottery, building materials, and other manufactured goods. Technical skills were lost as apprenticeship chains broke down. Trade became increasingly regional rather than Mediterranean-wide. Specialized production declined in favor of local self-sufficiency. Coins gave way to barter in many transactions. These changes were not uniform. Some regions maintained greater continuity with Roman economic patterns than others, but the general trend was toward simplification. This economic simplification had profound intellectual consequences. With fewer resources to support specialists in law, literature, and philosophy, cultural production diminished. Literacy rates declined as educational institutions lost funding. Knowledge became concentrated in religious institutions, particularly monasteries, which would play a crucial role in preserving classical learning through the coming centuries. The political fragmentation of the Western provinces created new economic boundaries. Trade across borders became more complicated as uniform Roman law gave way to various Germanic legal codes. different successor kingdoms issued their own currencies. Standards and measures began to diverge. Market sizes shrank, reducing opportunities for specialization and economies of scale. Yet within this fragmentation lay the seeds of Europe's medieval economy. The successor kingdoms maintained elements of Roman administration while adapting to new conditions. The Frankish kingdom under Charlemagne would later attempt a limited renaissance of Roman cultural and economic forms. With centralized imperial taxation gone, new economic relationships developed between landowners and those who worked their lands. These evolving relationships would eventually crystallize into feudal arrangements. Manorial economies developed, organized around the estates of the nobility and the church. The transformation from Roman province to medieval kingdom was neither sudden nor uniform. Historical records reveal significant regional variations. Areas with stronger Roman traditions, like southern Gaul and Italy, maintained greater continuity in urban life and commercial networks. More distant provinces like Britain experienced more dramatic economic simplification. What fascinates modern economists about Rome's fall is how a sophisticated economy could unravel. Ancient writers placed responsibility on moral decay or divine punishment. Later, historians emphasized barbarian invasions. But contemporary analysis recognizes the complexity of interacting factors: political, military, economic, environmental, and social, that transformed the Roman world. Perhaps we should understand Rome's fall not as a collapse but as an adaptation to changing conditions. The imperial system that had unified the Mediterranean basin proved unsustainable in its western provinces. Economic resources could no longer support the military and administrative structures needed to maintain it. What emerged was not chaos but different and less centralized forms of organization. The Eastern Roman Empire's survival demonstrates that adaptation was possible. By reforming its military, administrative, and economic systems, the Byzantine Empire withstood many of the same challenges that overwhelmed the West. Eventually, even Constantinople would fall in 1453. But the thousand-year continuation of Roman imperial tradition in the East stands as testament to the possibility of renewal and adaptation. The legacy of Rome's economic system outlived its political structures. Roman law, coinage, and concepts of property continued to influence medieval Europe. Roman roads still defined travel and trade routes. Roman cities, though diminished, remained focal points of regional life. The idea of Rome as a universal empire inspired political thinking for centuries. The fall of Rome was not the end of civilization, but rather a transformation into new forms. From the remnants of Rome's economy emerged medieval Europe's manorial system, guilds, and eventually the commercial revival of the High Middle Ages. Different, certainly, but carrying forward Roman economic and cultural DNA. The complex story of Rome's economic decline reminds us that even the most sophisticated systems can prove fragile when faced with multiple converging challenges. What appeared eternal to those living under the Pax Romana contained vulnerabilities that became apparent only in retrospect. Perhaps there lies the most relevant lesson for our own complex global systems.
We've got some amazing content coming your way. Subscribe now so you're first in line for fresh insights and all the good stuff you won't want to miss.